When we're at our most vulnerable, we surrender our fate to the hands of others, especially nurses. We believe them to be the purest expression of compassion and healing. But for 16 harrowing years, inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit world of emergency and critical care units across New Jersey and Pennsylvania, a terrifying truth was hidden. One man, dressed in standard blue scrubs, was exploiting that trust to commit murder. This is the true story of Charles Cullen. Unremarkable, soft-spoken, and by all surface appearances, a dedicated night shift registered nurse. But in the quiet, desperate hours when life hangs in the balance, he was a silent predator. For over a decade and a half, he used routine hospital drugs like digoxin and insulin to systematically end the lives of dozens, potentially hundreds, of patients. He earned the horrifying nickname, the Angel of Death. His story is the ultimate betrayal of trust. But the most chilling realization is that his rampage was not a solo act. It was enabled and prolonged by a dysfunctional healthcare system that repeatedly and deliberately chose financial and legal silence over the lives of the people entrusted to its care. Born in 1960, Charles Cullen's life was shadowed by instability. His father died when he was an infant, and his mother was killed in a car crash when he was a teenager. Cullen later described his childhood as miserable and confessed to his first of many suicide attempts at the age of 9. He attempted to join the Navy, only to be medically discharged before finding his calling in nursing school. He graduated in 1987 and immediately found work in the high-stress, understaffed world of critical care. A nursing shortage meant that hospitals were desperate for staff, creating a massive, poorly supervised void into which Cullen quickly disappeared. His destructive career began almost immediately at his first job at St. Barnabas Medical Center in 1988. Suspicion mounted quickly after saline bags were discovered spiked with insulin, causing patients to go into sudden, unexplained, and fatal shock. He was the primary suspect, but no charges were filed. When he moved on to his next positions at Warren Hospital and Hunterdon Medical Center, the pattern of inexplicable deaths followed. Cullen's method was simple and nearly untraceable. He would gain access to the hospital's automated drug dispensing machines, the computerized Pyxis units, by taking advantage of systemic laxity. He would order lethal doses of medications, most commonly the heart drug digoxin or insulin, often by ordering benign drugs stored in the same drawer or simply fabricating the need. These drugs, administered into a patient's foredrip, would cause rapid cardiac arrest or fatal hypoglycemia, perfectly mimicking a natural collapse in an already sick patient. Victims included a recovering breast cancer patient, a judge, and a teenage boy. There was no real profile, only opportunity. The sheer volume of patients Cullen encountered over his 16 years and the lack of proper autopsy or toxicology testing allowed these deaths to be routinely dismissed as inevitable. He would later offer changing, contradictory motives for his crimes. Sometimes he claimed he was acting out of mercy, putting very sick patients out of their misery. Other times, he would confess that the killings were impulsive or that he simply couldn't remember. The horrific ambiguity only deepened the terror. The most chilling revelation in the case is the way institutions repeatedly covered for him. Over 16 years, Cullen moved between 9 different hospitals and nursing homes. At each location, Cullen was flagged by colleagues, pharmacists, and supervisors. Hospitals uncovered clear evidence, suspicious access logs to the drug machines, instances of Cullen attempting to enter patient rooms he wasn't assigned to, and reports of him hoarding lethal drugs. Yet, when faced with overwhelming suspicion, none of these institutions contacted law enforcement or the State Board of Nursing. Why? They employed what was known as a silent termination. To avoid catastrophic lawsuits, expensive investigations, and the devastating public scandal of having a serial killer on staff, administrators would pressure Cullen to quietly resign, provide a neutral or even positive reference, and allow him to move on to the next unsuspecting facility. This vicious cycle was repeated for a decade and a half. The hospitals prioritized protecting their legal liability and financial standing over the lives of their patients. Charles Cullen himself later confirmed the system's complicity, stating that if someone had simply reported him earlier, he would have been stopped. The final unraveling of this nightmare began at Somerset Medical Center in 2003. Cullen's friend and coworker, Amy Luffren, an ICU nurse and single mother, was struggling to make ends meet and needed her job and health insurance desperately. She saw Charles as a kind, if somewhat sad, partner on the grueling night shift. But two tenacious detectives, Tim Braun and Danny Baldwin, were investigating a spike in inexplicable cardiac arrests at Somerset, notably the death of Reverend Florian Gall, who was recovering when he suddenly died of a digoxin overdose. The pattern led directly to Cullen's shift schedule and the Pyxis logs. The police knew they had their man, but they needed an airtight confession to defeat the legal wall of hospital secrecy. They turned to Amy. They presented her with the overwhelming data documenting Cullen's suspicious activity around the patients who died, shattering her professional trust and personal friendship. Amy was devastated, but her concern for the victims and the future outweighed her loyalty. She agreed to become the key to the entire case. She bravely arranged to meet Cullen at a public restaurant wearing a wire. In a tense, heart-wrenching confrontation, she appealed to the person she thought she knew, pressing him for answers. The emotional meeting elicited the crucial information investigators needed. Charles Cullen was arrested in December 2003. During interrogation, the true, horrifying scale of his crimes began to emerge. He confessed to killing around 40 people. He was ultimately convicted of 29 murders, receiving 18 consecutive life sentences. But investigators and experts, most notably journalist Charles Greber, who wrote The Good Nurse, believe the final tally is far, far higher. Because he often poisoned 4 bags indiscriminately across several hospitals, it's estimated that Charles Cullen may have killed up to 400 people, a number that would make him the most prolific serial killer in American history. This story is a profound human tragedy compounded by profound systemic failure. Multiple institutions had the opportunity to stop him and chose silence. The fact that the ultimate act of heroism came from a single, overworked nurse, Amy Luffren, working outside the established chain of command, is a searing indictment of where the system's true priorities lay. The angel of death proved that sometimes the greatest dangers aren't hidden in the shadows, but are allowed to walk freely under the brightest lights, protected by negligence and greed.